not just anybody. You know, I need someone. Younger than today. I never needed anybody's help in any way. But now these days are gone and I'm not so self-assured. Now I find the change my mind. I'm open up the door. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down. And I do appreciate you being around.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal, right here on Revolution Radio Studio B, this 25th day of April 2025. I have a wonderful guests at the bottom of the hour, including Sasha Larapova and Debbie Lehrman and Monique Lukens, where we're going to be talking about COVID big time with some of the world's leading experts. Meanwhile, Brian Davidson, co-host, is here today, and we're going to begin with some of the latest news, including rather disturbing developments, I must say. For whatever reason, I'm not getting the share. Try it again. Here we go. Yes, Hal Turner. Biggest indication of Middle East war came today. Very disturbing. What do we got? We got these aircraft, these monster aircraft that are only used in direct combat. Of all the military movement we've seen toward Middle East over the last month, this is the one the most telling. Something is imminent. After dozens of C-17s and C-5s, cargo planes, two Air Force security Sentry Airborne early morning and control arrived earlier. This is very serious. We have these from Tinker Air Force Base, two planes here that are indicate a battle sequence is laden and ready. They use these planes to detect foes for our military as we go into battle. It's worth knowing Russia has enacted, the Russian President Putin has signed strategic agreement with Iran. It is valid and in full force in effect. It's also worthy. Both Russia and China have spoken publicly about Iran, telling the world they will not sit back and allow their BRICS member and ally, Iran, to be attacked and destroyed. I believe them. I think the United States is acting in a reckless fashion if Trump thinks that's not going to happen. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio has made the absurd demand that Iran must stop its nuclear enrichment program. Every country is entitled to have nuclear enrichment for people purposes. We know they're not working on a weapons program. Even Tulsi Gabbard has reported the consensus of the intelligence community. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in an interview released on Wednesday, that Iran cannot enrich uranium under any deal with the U.S., an ideal Tehran has said is unacceptable. Frankly, it's absurd. Rubino said Iran could maintain a civilian nuclear program, but it would have to import enriched uranium to use as fuel. If Iran wants a civil nuclear program, they can have one, just like many other countries in the world that they import enriched uranium. This is just insulting. And get this, we got Senator Fetterman. Many of us have wondered about his competence. Here I think it's displayed unmistakably. Calls for President Trump to bomb Iran. Senator John Fetterman has called for the Trump admin to end negotiation with Iran and bomb Iranian nuclear facilities. Waste that shit, Fetterman told the Washington Free Press in an interview published Wednesday. You're never going to be able to negotiate with that kind of regime that had been destabilizing the region for decades already, showing he's an ignoramus as well as a moron. Now we have an incredible window, I believe, to do that, to strike and destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. Brian, I'm just appalled that the United States is even contemplating such a thing. Iran is perhaps the world's greatest peaceful nation, having not launched an attack against any other nation since 1775. Even Tulsi Gabbard, director of national intelligence, confirmed to Congress the consensus of the intelligence community that Iran does not possess and is not seeking to develop nuclear weapons. But I think we know what's going on. We're being asked to do the dirty work for Israel. This is disgusting. Your thoughts?
Well, I've seen a lot of mixed signals come out of the Trump administration in regards to continuing to support Israel. This is Israel's battle. Israel wants to have the Greater Israel Project, which is going to theoretically expand their territory into Syria and Saudi Arabia. It's funny that this morning I saw that Trump had proposed giving Saudi Arabia a $100 billion weapons package. It looks like he's just going to give it to them. Now, what is he doing that for? It's probably some sort of deal to help strengthen and back Israel even more. Again, I've seen the mixed messages coming from the Trump administration. On some things, he says, well, we're not going to support Israel attacking Iran. The Iran nuclear talks seem to be going well with the United States, but Iran is also out there pushing to get into nuclear talks with the rest of the European powers as well. So, a lot of developments in that. I can tell you that Iran is not going to, the negotiations with Iran are not going to go over well unless we're willing to downgrade our support of Israel continuing. It's funny that Israel's starting to deal with some of the trouble from the International Criminal Court, which they've been ignoring for so long. But it seems like across almost all the alternative news platforms, the Gaza story continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, which tells me that the world is just not going to continue to close its eyes and bury its head in the sand related to Israel's war crimes in Gaza. Just yesterday, they killed another 48 people in Gaza yesterday and sent in unmanned bulldozers to start cleaning up the property. So they're literally sending in robots and bulldozers to clean up all the rubble that they've left behind after they bombed the place into oblivion. They've killed so many people over there. It's a terrible war crime. And it does look like the International Criminal Court is starting to get some attention from Israel. So I would venture to say that in time, Trump will negotiate to start with the rest of the world and start keeping more distance from Israel. But his track record in that particular area has not been very strong. So it's difficult for me to say what's going to happen, but I think the Iran issue is a lot more interesting. And of course, it's the warmongers and the military apparatus, Lockheed, Boeing, all the rest of the military industrial complex uh, machine that's driving guys like Fetterman, who used to, consider himself to be a sort of a center leftist and has been all over the board. And but you can tell that there's something out there where that particular branch of Fetterman's
Right.
platform needs the military industrial complex money. So that's why all of a sudden Fetterman's going to come out here with this left field position.
Let me throw in another fact, and I'm going to invite Sasha's comment. I'm sure she has a lot to say. Look, Trump has said it's going to be a short window here. They're going to decide within 2 weeks whether there's a peace prospect with Iran. We do have reports that there are negotiations, but what would Iran have to give up? I mean, if you got Rubio saying they got to give up their whole nuclear enrichment program, it ain't going to happen. The other factor, Trump has now given Israel these massive bunker busting bombs. Now, it's been speculated they were for use against Iran. I'm speculating they're going to use them on Gaza. Hamas has a huge network of tunnels beneath Gaza. The Israelis are telling Jews to get out of Gaza. I think they're going to use them on Gaza. Sasha, I'd welcome your comments.
the comment about Gaza? I'm sorry.
Gaza ran the whole package here.
Y- Yeah, I'm not a, geopolitics commentator, so, generally I only have kind of lay opinions about this, but
Yeah, that's all I want is a lay opinion. That's fine.
yes. So, I mean, all these war-mongering moves by Trump administration, I mean, to me, they only indicate that the empire is collapsing. They can't maintain the empire that they used to. They're stuck between this gigantic debt and the desire to maintain dollars as a reserve currency. And all the countries are peeling off into different groups and alliances because US can no longer maintain the empire. So all of these kind of thrashing around and trying to go after Iran and demand, yeah, it's ridiculous demanding that they import uranium. What business do we have to dictate to other nations how they manage their energy infrastructure? So all of this is just like I would say last stages of collapsing global empire. It can be violent, and yes, it can start a whole bunch of wars. But I think this is a lot of it is bluffing also because the US does not have resources, people, decimated military, they decimated the civilian population with all these you know, COVID response that Trump launched. And so now they're just thrashing around, pretending like they're global superpowers still, but they're not. And so
Yeah,
this is what we're observing is the net effect of this.
yes. And I think for a lay opinion, you're doing pretty well, okay? Now we got the NATO chief lobbying Trump not to pressure Ukraine to make peace with Russia. As NATO wants the war to continue. Brian, I'm almost stunned by this. The head of the North Atlantic Alliance is traveling to the U.S. for a meeting with top officials in the Trump admin. Secretary General Mark Rutte is expected to push the White House not to force Ukraine into a peace deal with Russia. According to Financial Times, Rutte will urge President Trump's admin not to force Ukraine to accept a peace deal against its will during meetings with embattled defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Waltz, of course, is a fanatic. He's the guy who's brought bad people into the Department of Defense, violating security and all this. Meanwhile, Kremlin is saying peace is possible if Ukraine withdraws from Russian claimed territory. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Wednesday peace in Ukraine was possible if Ukrainian forces withdrew from territory in the four oblasts Moscow annexed in 2022. It's really the four oblasts plus Crimea that Russia is not going to surrender. Financial Times reported Tuesday that Putin was willing to freeze the current battle line for a peace deal, which marks a significant concession from Moscow. Peskov's comment suggests Russia may be demanding Ukraine withdraw from the territory it controls in Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. He said Russia's claim to the territory was enshrined in its constitution. When asked if the Ukrainian withdrawal from those oblasts would end the war, Peskov said, if Ukraine withdraws its troops from these four regions, then yes. That's the closest I've heard. Meanwhile, Trump is slamming Zelensky for delaying peace negotiations. The Kremlin is launching massive attacks on Kiev. And get this, Trump is telling Putin to stop the attacks. Isn't just ludicrous? President Trump Thursday urged Russian President Putin to stop following major Russian strikes on the Ukrainian capital Kiev, which local officials said killed at least 12. I'm not happy with the Russian strikes on Kiev, and I prefer the historic name to this Kiev, which is just silly. Not necessary. Very bad timing. He wrote on Truth Social, Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done. Of course, those are almost all Ukrainian soldiers. Virtually none of them are Russian. Where the latest estimates have it that Ukraine has lost over 1 million troops. Russia maybe 150,000. Brian, your thoughts?
Well, ever since the very beginning of this, the one non-negotiable issue that Ukraine or that Russia has had is that Ukraine cannot join NATO. And Ukraine absolutely has to give up all of its NATO aspirations in order to have any sort of peace deal or permanent ceasefire negotiated between Russia and Ukraine. Um, the new proposals that have been being floated around really break down Russia's negotiations into about five different points. They want a permanent ceasefire and the initiation of immediate negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. They want Ukraine to give up all its NATO aspirations. They want the United States to recognize Russia's control over Crimea, as well as Zaporizhzhia and the Kherson regions. Russia wants the U.S. to cooperate with them in terms of helping to rebuild the energy industry, and they want all the sanctions removed. Ukraine is willing to start talks with Russia on the issues of territory, but they want to have their own way. And they want to have the United States come in and guarantee their safety and security. And they want Europe to demand security guarantees in response to the peace proposal. Um, Ukraine is asking for a tremendous amount. And it seems to me that what's happening is that Putin's gone a little silent in terms of how he's continuing to negotiate. It looks like he's not getting his way, and he's going to continue to hammer and show his military power. It's about time. He's been dragging his feet in terms of displaying his military power for a long time, and it seems like he's going to open that up and continue to tear the place apart until America convinces Ukraine to totally abandon its aspirations to join NATO. Remember what Russia sees of this with this vast border is that if Ukraine joins NATO, it's just going to be another front for NATO missile silos and Western threats that are going to continue to hammer on Moscow and hammer on Russia. So he knows he can't trust us. The only way this is going to happen is if Ukraine completely abandons Western aspirations and chooses to go back and join Russia instead of instead of trying to continue to align itself and sell out to Western influence.
Yeah, an especially alarming prospect because Moscow is in close proximity. I mean, Ukraine is just absurd to think that. And of course, we're violating the solemn agreement we made to Gorbachev when the Soviet Union dissolved, and we swore the West would not encroach 1 inch to the east, and now we've taken like 17 more countries from Eastern Europe into NATO. I mean, frankly, Western word doesn't mean a damn. And after, for example, with regard to the earlier Iran deal, nuclear deal, Trump just pulls out. Why would Iran think they have any reason to have confidence in the U.S. or its word? And with regard to Russia, when the Minsk agreement was used merely as a camouflage for militarily building up Ukraine, and even Angela Merkel admitted as much, that it was insincere. How can Putin have any trust? Sasha, I think the United States, the West, has no credibility whatsoever, which makes negotiations almost impossible. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. So, if in any negotiations, any good negotiator is good at putting themselves in the shoes of the opposing party and thinking through their priorities. Whether you are adversarial negotiator or friendly negotiator, it's the same. And if you are negotiating against a party that's unpredictable, capricious, goes back on their word all the time, what's the purpose for negotiation? If I were representing any of these countries opposing the US in negotiations, that would be my position. Why should I trust anything you say? Why should I even show up to the negotiations when I am against a party that constantly goes back on their words? And it's not just the territorial grab that has happened over the past few decades, and expansion of NATO. It's also all the financial US wants to have reserve currency, wants to control the banking transactions and so forth, the SWIFT, and then they randomly just steal millions of dollars from other countries in sanctions, So
Yeah.
so how are you a trusted party for military alliances, for trade alliances, or for banking alliances? How is this projecting a trust internationally? It's not.
Yes. 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 Russia, of course, had four demands. They keep the territories, no NATO ever, demilitarization of Ukraine, and most difficult, denazification. But the idea that when they've lost a war so massively, their casualties have been so staggering, that corruption has been so grotesque, the idea of continuing this war is absurd. We have all kinds of stories from Gaza, but they're, for the most part, very, very familiar. Israel is using suicide drones to target displaced Palestinian families sheltering in tents. I mean, the sadistic character of the Netanyahu government is beyond imagination. Killing Gaza aid workers, IDF troops fired indiscriminately for over 3 minutes, some at point blank range. Get this, I love this. U.S. has launched 750 airstrikes on Yemen since March 15th, and the Yemeni have not stopped. I love these guys. They said that may be the most magnificent fighting force in the world today. They declared war on Israel. They're acting in accordance with international law. They're only interdicting ships bound for Israel, which is appropriate in accordance with the laws of war. Violating those same laws, the United States has been attacking them massively. Look at this, 750 strikes, as a result of which they're attacking American ships now, including two carrier groups, the Davidson and the Truman. And I declare they're going to sink those ships. I have no doubt. Meanwhile, the U.S. is frustrated by bombing and bombing to no effect, as though the Houthis weren't used to it. Brian, your thoughts?
From a big picture perspective, we no longer have control of the zoo, and the animals are getting very, very restless. It used to be sort of a Kissinger style of US hegemony, would control all the animals in the zoo, and we would use carrots and sticks and pots of gold and lots of threats and sanctions to
Who is?
control everything. But it seems to me it's just simply not working anymore. And the reason that it's not working anymore is because we don't appear to be an independent third party at all anymore. We appear to be allied almost completely with Israel. Israel has become the bane of the world's existence in terms of um, what it's doing, the stink that they're putting on. They've cut off the water supply now in Gaza. How long? Talk about absolutely committing war crimes day in and day out. And of course, the International Criminal Court is doing what it can, but it doesn't have a number of nations, including the United States and Russia, that have signed off on agreeing to do it. Most countries are not willing to get their hands on these Israeli operators and send them out. It looks like the only warrant that's out there is for Netanyahu. And as long as he doesn't land in an ICC country that has agreed to detain and deport or detain and send Netanyahu in for trial, then Netanyahu's going to be getting away scot-free. Plus, Trump has come out and said, oh, well, anybody who decides that they want to enforce an ICC ruling is going to have sanctions from the whole Western appliance coming down on them. So, but on the other hand, you're seeing a lot of chatter out there in the alternative community about the ICC continuing to apply pressure on Netanyahu, the war criminals. So I think that it's only a matter of time before America realizes that in order to get control of the rest of the zoo, we're going to have to break off our alliances with Israel and leave their neighbors in Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Syria, Damascus, and Egypt, even Egypt, um, are the possibility that they're going to begin acting independently about this problem will remain if we abandon them. And
Let
I hope to
me
see that happen.
Let me just add, I just had one call from Keith Rogers in Montana listening to the show. He's my co host on Mondays, just as Brian here is my co host on Fridays. Keith said Trump has dispatched American ground forces to Yemen. Even though that's in violation of constitutional authority, his attacks on Yemen in violation of international law. I think this guy is setting himself for impeachment if the Congress has any integrity, but of course it does not. Because as Thomas Massey has explained, everyone except himself as an APAC handler, every member of Congress, to make sure they don't wander off the reservation. Sasha, even I am shocked to hear this report. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, that describes the situation exactly. So, as I said, part of this imperial collapse is that, the empire starts collapsing on its most um, important.
We'll be taking a break right here and we'll return. Thank you. Stand by. Watch the show.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Management would like to take a moment to thank the listeners and hosts for all their support that has made Revolution Radio one of the biggest platforms for free speech in an ever-growing dark world of censorship. Unfortunately, this platform for free speech has never been free. We need the support of the people. It is the people like you, yes, you, that keeps the station in the front lines of the battle against tyranny and oppression. Please help support Revolution Radio so free speech will not be silenced in a world that seems to be going deaf to the real truth. With your support, we will be able to become an even bigger pillar of light in a dark world.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Revolution Radio.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, I'm so delighted to have Sasha here on the show. She is one of the world's leading experts on COVID. Debbie may be joining us, and Monique, who arranged this event. So we'll anticipate. Meanwhile, Sasha, do you think this bird flu thing is going to presage another fake pandemic? Tell us your latest thoughts on what's going on in the world of pandemics.
Well, the most important thing you need to know about pandemics is that they're fake. They don't exist, okay? So there's no such thing as a pandemic, and it actually never happened in the history of the world. And I immediately get accused of, oh, but what about Black Death? And I have an article on that coming up. But Black Death wasn't pandemic either. It's overhyped. Basically, yes, these were epidemics that were related to poor sanitary conditions in crowded medieval cities, infestations with rats. Plague can only be spread by fleas. It doesn't spread directly human to human. So you need a very large infestation of fleas, literally crawling all over your house, carrying the plague bacterium, and you need to have very poor sanitation, bad, water and all that, and be in bad health, and then maybe you'll get the plague. So that's how these diseases start. And so obviously they do not travel all over the world simultaneously. There's no such thing. COVID wasn't a pandemic either. It was a faked event started by the US military, DARPA, and pre-planned, also organized by the US military and DARPA in collaboration with their private pharmaceutical collaborators and academia. And the same is with this bird flu. It doesn't exist. It's a computer model. Same with SARS-CoV-2. It's a computer model. Nothing like this exists in the reality. Today, California has announced, California is one of the states that I think they were the first to announce bird flu emergency. And I get reports all the time that the CDC agents and USDA agents and California state representatives are all like desperately hunting for a case of bird flu. So the hospitals are all instructed to test everybody who presents with any, sniffles, flu-like symptoms, and because they're just so desperate to get cases to claim that there is a pandemic of bird flu, but there is no such thing. All of these things are fakes in order to implement emergency powers at the state or at the state level or federal level, implement emergency powers, because coming back to the discussion about collapsing empire, the empire is collapsing. They can't run it under normal governance. They need continuous set of emergencies to implement it more and more and more tyranny, take away more assets, because they literally can't fund themselves any other way.
Sasha, does this mean that the military via DARPA was engaged in the master plan to depopulate the world? Because, of course, the shot brought to us by Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and the like had such devastating effects. I mean, the statistics are overwhelming. You get more honest from UK. The morticians reporting these huge, long, fibrous blood clots, unlike anything they've ever seen. Microscopic studies are live organism. There seem to be self-replicating automata of some weird kind, that it's a form of genetic therapy or alteration to our DNA, totally unlike what they claimed. And of course, marketed on the ground that the shot would be socially obligatory, our moral duty, lest we transmit to others. That was used as a primary club to beat people into agreeing to take the shot so they'd be civilized human beings, when the shots were never designed, not even tested for inhibiting transmission. It was all one big lie after another. I mean, the big story here is appalling. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, yes, it was a big lie from the very beginning, and the objective was to push this mRNA poison on everyone, disguised as a vaccine. So that was the plan from the beginning. It was articulated by Fauci and Rick Bright, who was the director of BARDA. It's a military arm of CDC. It's kind of like a hybrid between Health and Human Services and DoD. It's militarized, essentially militarized healthcare arm of both. And so they set up this plan and prepared this plan. There's video of Fauci and Rick Bright discussing it in 2018 at Milken Institute. They were planning to shock the society because they were saying people will refuse vaccines. So we need a universal vaccination for whatever reason. And people refuse vaccines. And so therefore we need to create an event of excitement, by which I mean, fear mongering propaganda that we have a deadly virus that emerged in China. They always emerge in China. Like China is the center of all the deadly viruses evolving, Like why? What's so special about China? It's not even some kind of a tropical country, right? So it's always blame China. By the way, I'm reviewing the history of US bioweapons and chemical weapons development programs. And from the 40s, it ran from mid 40s to 1970 officially. They then unofficially expanded it to academia. But even during those times, the script was always, whatever you're doing here in the US, testing all this stuff on humans, on civilians without telling anyone, if something happens, you blame China. If something happens, we blame it's Chinese virus evolved. So for example, I've published on this. There was a huge aerial spraying. It's called Large Area Coverage Program by U.S. military flying airplanes and spraying cadmium, zinc cadmium sulfide, which they claim is benign, but it's not benign. These are toxic chemicals. And so spraying them all over the US and even parts of Canada. And this was, thousands of flights, huge aerial spraying of this stuff. That was in the winter of 57, 58. And during that time, surprise, surprise, we have Asian flu pandemic. And you can look up on the CDC website. It says that dangerous virus evolved in China and traveled all over the world and somehow hit the United States, but nowhere else.
Yes.
So they're doing these things all the time, and they always blame China. Now we have the new development. Okay, so big splash from Trump administration, lab leak, COVID-19 website called Lab Leak. So for several years they were lying to us, telling us that Trump administration was lying to us. From the very beginning, he was always saying it's evolved in China, this dangerous virus evolved in China. For several years, that was his narrative, his administration narrative, then Biden's administration narrative. If you said anything to the contrary, saying this is bullshit, that nothing is evolved in China, you would get kicked off social media, right? The censorship was so strong. Now, in the good Lord's year 2025, it's okay to say that it's a lab leak. It's a dangerous virus developed by Fauci in China. However, we forgot to tell our NATO allies that that's the new narrative. So the NATO website still says it's a dangerous virus that evolved in Chinese market, natural virus. So we can see that the empire is collapsing. They can't even keep their lies straight anymore. But as I said, all of this was a plan prepared. There's a script that goes back decades that they use all the time. They do these false flag attacks on civilians, and then they say it's Chinese evolved virus. And this is how they do it all the time.
Fascinating. Brian, I'm sure you have lots of questions for Sasha. Please join the conversation.
Well, I guess from my perspective, being that I'm not a biology guy, I have very little understanding of what they call modern medicine. I tend to think of it more as a death cult than I do think of
Yes,
it as
that's correct.
as medicine
That's the correct
whatsoever. Look, it was October of 2020 that a guy by the name of Cardinal Vigano, who has now been excommunicated from the Catholic Church, I think it was 2024, about June, that he was excommunicated. But he had written a series of letters to Trump, and one of them was an open letter that was sent to him on October 2020, warning him that they would be rolling out the global Great Reset Agenda 201 in the first trimester of 2021. And of course, I think it was June 18th is officially or January 18th is officially recorded as the beginning date of the pandemic. And of course, there was a lot of buzz. See, China is the perfect place to set up the draconian population controls because it's very easy to buy the Chinese government. And think of biolabs in Wuhan as well as Ukraine. Well, what does China and Ukraine have in common? They're places that will sell their soul for anything. The Chinese Communist Party would sell their soul. And so it doesn't surprise me that Fauci had decided that Wuhan would be the place where this gain of function research would take place, whatever it actually is. Obviously, they were trying to figure out how to create some sort of sickness that would spread and that they could use it. But I guess fundamentally, the question is, what is the output? What is the expected um, result of Event 201 besides for draconian health restrictions, travel restrictions, breathing restrictions, worship restrictions? It seems that they wanted the whole world to sort of constrict so that they could pass this sort of global government, I'm guessing, and it was based on the platform of hey, look, we've got to implement global health rules so that we can move to our new world order. How do you see the Great Reset Agenda 201 feeding into this concept of the new world order, unless they wanted the new world order to just look like China, with one superclass and everybody else being slaves?
Yes, exactly. They want the new world order to look like China or, former Soviet Union. It's a form of communism that they want to implement. Ultimately, all, this is like a normal evolution, normal. But if you read history, this is how the empires evolve. So they initially have, early growth stages, expansion. Then they eventually run out of money because all of this, empire essentially is maintained by massive outflows of money and keeping everyone, all the satellites, happy by the flow of money. So they bribe them first to get them to join alliance, but ultimately they have to continuously feed money in administering this entire imperial space that they've built. And so, like, for example, US owns, so if people are talking about Ukraine biolabs and Wuhan biolab. So first of all, Ukraine biolabs are 100% owned by the US and have been for 20 years. People don't understand. In 2005, Ukraine sold all of those biolabs to CDC for $15 million, which is a ridiculous sum of money. But, so for $15 million, Ukraine turned over all of their biolabs to CDC. So they're CDC biolabs. They're not Ukrainian biolabs. Same with Wuhan. Wuhan is owned by NIH because NIH funds Wuhan. So it's a US biolab. So that's what I'm saying. All of this bullshit is bullshit. They're making up all these computer models. Then they parse out the most kind of controversial aspects of the work that needs to be done to these overseas locations that are seemingly in other countries, but in fact actually owned by the US. And the US military funds them, and NIH funds them, and all of that. So that's how they do it. And then they point the finger at Wuhan. While the work was done by Ralph Barrick in North Carolina, it was farmed to a whole bunch of other universities in the US, prestigious universities in the US. US has thousands of biolabs. Every academic institution has a biolab. And so they do most of the work. Then they farm out, little pieces here and there. And then, Wuhan plays convenient role for them when they need to announce a hoax like this. They'll say, oh, it's those bad people in China. They work on these dangerous gain of function things. And Fauci gave them money. Let's yell at Fauci. But this is a US government policy. Fauci, it's not something Fauci came up with, although he's evil and he should be prosecuted. But it's not even his policy. It's the National Security Council, which was in charge of COVID response. And now National Security Council consists of military and intelligence. It does not have health in it. It does not have, Fauci has nothing to do with National Security Council. So that's what I'm saying. It's a policy of the US government, which we're seeing implemented. And then and the policy always involved since the 40s, it involved blaming China for evolving viruses. So that's how they do it.
Wonderful, wonderful how they trade on the ambiguity of the location versus the ownership of the lab. Because it's
Yes, exactly.
the Chinese
Those
brain, the Ukrainian labs, what it is that you say all bullshit. I mean,
yeah.
this is America's best product, at least in biggest quantity. Bullshit. That's what we do. That's what we stand before the world. Bullshit. It's appalling, Sasha.
It
This
is.
is the country has disgraced itself. I mean, I grew up believing in America. I served in the Marine Corps as a commissioned officer, then a professor of philosophy for 35 years. I've never seen anything like this. It's a disgrace. We've abdicated our role. We have no morality, no principle. I mean, who the hell is running America?
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Go ahead.
yeah, and the problem is that who runs America, it's not, we don't have a constitutional governance anymore. Haven't had in reality for some time, but officially, 2020 announcement of national emergency under Stafford Act and COVID pandemic, which hasn't been terminated yet. We're still under the COVID pandemic. So all of that suspended the Constitution. So these announcements have net effect of announcing a state of war. So Trump has announced that U.S. is in a state of war on its territory. This is how these declarations are made. And since he announced that we're in a state of war, none of this, we don't have a constitutional governance anymore. For example, the J6 defenders, when they were trying to get, to assert their rights under the Constitution to a fair trial and speedy trial, were told by judges point blank, that amendment of the Constitution has been suspended because of COVID-19. Well, you know what? You can't suspend a single amendment of a constitution. It means the whole constitution is suspended, and the judge was actually briefed on it. So that's what happened. In 2020, Trump administration announced a state of war on the U.S. territory, deployed the military force. All of this Operation Warp Speed, it wasn't logistics. It wasn't just driving trucks around. It was a military program, bioweapons program. The laws that are invoked here, the PrEP Act, it has been designed only for seaborne attacks, so chemical, radiological, biological, nuclear weapons attacks. That's why National Security Council was put in charge of the policy and had nothing to do with HHS. That's why all the previously developed public health plans for managing epidemics were thrown out of the window and replaced with nonsensical tyranny, which was, we're going to make everyone miserable. We're going to make everyone lose their jobs. We're going to shut down business as well. So one of the aspects, and we're discussing why are they doing it, is control of the population. It's enabling this Chinese style or communist style tyranny in the US. But another part of it is financial. As I said, the empire is collapsing. They're running out of money. They can't maintain this mountain of debt anymore. So what do? Trump announces this pandemic. They do lockdowns. What's the significance of lockdowns in addition to inducing tyranny is they stop the real economy by the lockdown, and then they flood the space with trillions of new dollars authorized, and this flood of dollars is going through their preferred channels. So the real economy is prevented from using it. It goes through these mega corporations, through pharma companies, obviously, through all of their preferred, through the banks, bailing out all of the friends of administration that they need to bail out, preventing so Walmart is open, Target is open, but mom and pop is closed, bars are closed, restaurants are closed, everything is closed. So what happens is then this inflation, this gigantic inflation with trillions of dollars, benefits preferred people, the parts of the cabal that they want to benefit themselves, while preventing the rest of the economy from using this money, meaning they're deflating and inflating at the same time. Inflating in their favor, deflating everyone else. Okay, so that's what they're doing. That's why they want another one. They desperately want another one, but people like us are preventing them from doing it because we're calling BS on it, right? So that's why they're so desperate about this next avian flu. And they tried with many other things like Mpox, and they're, were threatening about Ebola. They were threatening about Marburg. All of those declarations are open right now. They're constantly trying to implement some sort of a new pandemic because that's such a great financial mechanism for them, and they're so desperate for every penny that they can, grab somewhere to keep funding themselves.
My question for you, Sasha, is did it work?
It worked partially, as far as financially, it worked for a period of time. So that's why they're like, wow, this worked for like 18 months or so, which is big deal for them. Every month counts. So they're like, how can we do it again as far as the financial aspect of it? So actually, partially tariffs, this nonsensical stuff about tariffs is also that play, because tariffs, the way they're implemented, they're not even tariffs. They're just a complete nonsense. They're throwing these numbers around. It's trade deficit, it's trade imbalances that they're calling tariffs, and then setting these ridiculous, percentages like 200%, 100% tariffs. So all of that is designed again to punish smaller businesses, the real economy that they don't care about. So again, the mom and pop shops that are, selling some small set of products, they're not Amazon. They're, ordering those products from China. So they're going to be hurt. So they will be prevented from doing business. While Amazon, not really. Apple, no, because they already gave them exemptions. Pharma, he keeps talking about, oh, pharma is going to have tariffs, but in reality, there are no tariffs on pharma. And so all these like plays with tariffs, it's the same play. It's like, how can I prevent these other businesses from spending money, because that drives inflation. So I need to deflate them, but I need to inflate myself because, they need to separate the elite from the rest of it. And those are these financial plays. So they're partially successful. Now, as far as the depopulation plan, people are saying, well, they didn't kill enough people. I'm like, well, you know what? Even the conservative estimates of something like 20 million or 25 million worldwide, that's the largest genocide of, compares to the largest genocides out there, right? But I think the real numbers are much higher, and also they're not accounting for the sterility induced in younger people. We still don't know the outcome of it. The future cancer, the cancers are now picking up, so that is not counted in those numbers. So everybody who got injected, in my opinion, will have their lifespan reduced somehow, and I think that was the plan, because they need to get rid of primarily the retirees and everyone, people with disabilities, people who are chronically ill because of vaccine injuries, but they need to get rid of them because they're net drain on those entitlement payments that the government has to make. So
So if they've accomplished the short-term goal of thinning the herd, did they fail at the long-term goal of producing herd immunity? Because now we've got young people who are open to the idea that medicine is a fraud. Now we've got a medical industrial apparatus that is being voided by most of the population. We've got a massive portion of the herd that has moved over to alternative media and no longer shows any confidence in the traditional propaganda brainwashing platforms that are out there. I would argue that it backfired completely because they can't do this again. They might think they can, but the population just simply won't buy it. I don't see Americans putting on masks for another disaster and going down to get some injection in their blood. I see young people kicking against the goads in terms of, I don't want you to inject my baby with that crap. I see people waking up to the idea that autism is really a result of the injections. I see sort of a new breed of health-centric herd population that no longer trusts their government and the machine that's pushing us so hard towards it. So I guess I would argue it failed completely, although it had short-term effects.
well, the long term, I agree with you. I think it that's my optimism, and my hope is that enough people get awakened by this, and once somebody sees that they've been lied to on this such grand scale for so long, there's no restoration of trust. And notice that the Trump administration, claims that they're here to restore the trust, and especially I follow mostly HHS developments, And they claim that, oh, we have to restore trust in public health and restore trust in medicine. And they go about it by lying, by continuing to lie, by, they have this, this MAHA policy was written by Kelly Means, who is a deep state agent. He is a big pharma lobbyist. His father is as deep state as it gets, Grady Means. And that's been their saying, is to write up these talking points and policies. And so the MAHA policy was drafted by these people, and they're pretending like they're going after, the toxins in food and water, and we're going to investigate all the reasons for chronic disease epidemic. And the only reason that worth investigating is vaccines, and they're avoiding it like hell. So I actually renamed MAHA policy ABV policy, anything but vaccines. So they're going to blame climate change, Red 3 that nobody's using anyway, and they're parading like they banned Red 3 dye in food, and that's such a huge win for MAHA. But it's not being used at all anymore, and actually, they're also giving it 2 years to fade
Real
out.
quick, what's your take on RFK and his role in this?
I am very disappointed at RFK, frankly. I met him a couple times. I was on his podcast. We've discussed one of the podcasts in 23. We talked about militarized healthcare. We've discussed all of the stuff that I'm talking about now, the PrEP Act, the
This is
announcement.
a perfect place for us to begin right after the break, but we're hitting the break now.
Okay.
I'm so happy to have you here. We'll be right back with Sasha and Brian. Stand by.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Was it a conspiracy? Did you know that the police in Boston were broadcasting "This is a drill, this is a drill" on bullhorns during the marathon? That the Boston Globe was tweeting that a demonstration bomb would be set off during the marathon for the benefit of bomb squad activities? And that one would be set off in 1 minute in front of the library, which happened as the Globe had announced. Peering through the smoke, you could see bodies with missing arms and legs, but there was no blood. The blood only showed up later and came out of a tube. They used amputee actors and a studio-quality smoke machine. Don't let yourself
Go to
be
Tweet
played.
Event. Tell him to
Nobody died
take
in
your
Boston
losses.
either.
Let's go to Tweet Event
Available at
instead.
moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
Well, at least you catch the
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, during the break, I was showing images that a pro-Palestinian group at Yale had its status withdrawn, being punished for protesting against genocide. Sasha, of all the bad things Trump is doing, and he's doing a hell of a lot of them abroad, this is a disgusting in the United States, a violation of freedom of speech. I regard this as a blatant violation of his oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. This is an impeachable offense. Sending ground troops to Yemen, violation of congressional standards where he has to secure the permission or authorization of Congress, that's an impeachable offense. I regard sending all these weapons to Israel to slaughter the Palestinians as an impeachable offense. I supported this guy through thick and thin. I voted for him 3 times. I think he's disgusting. He's sold out to the government. He's nothing but a Bibi stooge. He's as bloody. His hands are as bloody as Netanyahu. That's how I feel today. I am disgusted. I'm repulsed by Donald Trump. Your thoughts, whatever. That's just my take.
Well,
And I'll get...
Yeah, I had disgust for him since 2020, since launch of Operation Warp Speed. And what it resulted in, the mass tragedy, the mass genocide in the US and worldwide. And obviously US played the leading role in launching all this atrocity on the entire world. So I've had a problem with Trump since this Operation Warp Speed and the impact of it. Of course, he has taken no responsibility, no accountability. He still promotes it as the greatest accomplishment, his wonderful vaccines. And unfortunately, so we were talking about RFK Jr. So I had a lot of respect for him. I talked to him. Yeah. We discussed the militarized healthcare podcast in 23. We discussed all this, the atrocity, the Operation Warp Speed, how the military was driving it and pretending like it's a public health event. So it's only a pretend public health event. It has nothing to do with public health. It's an attack on all of us, a military attack on all of us using the United States Armed Forces, which is high treason, punishable by death, deploying US armed forces onto the civilian population and deploying chemical weapons, which is these injections and remdesivir. They're chemical weapons. They're designed to kill. Everybody who was in charge of these things knew that they were going to kill millions of people, knew that they are not vaccines, and they pushed them and lied about them, and they continue lying about it. So I was disappointed when RFK Jr. folded his presidential campaign, and joined Trump's campaign. I already had big reservations about it. Once they announced in September, they announced this MAHA policy designed by Kelly Means, which is denying any role of vaccines in chronic disease epidemic, which is atrocious. They are the number one reason. Vaccines in general, all vaccines, not just mRNA, all vaccines, they've never been regulated as drugs. They're always unregulated, they're always poisonous, and they cause all chronic diseases. So I've had extensive data sets collected on unvaccinated people. Actually, they do exist. So the group of people found is completely unvaccinated people in the US, did a very extensive survey, demonstrated that completely unvaccinated people have around 2% risk of any chronic disease throughout the entire lifespan. This is going into the 80s. Okay, 2%. Now we have 65% of kids obese. Do you know why? It's vaccines. Vaccines destroy microbiome. It's not the diet. It's not the sugar or fat or anything. It's the vaccines. They destroy microbiome. And do you know how we fatten up animals so that they grow bigger, faster, and produce more meat and fat? Well, we vaccinate them. Do you know how we produce in clinical trials, how we produce cancerous animals for research? How we produce animals with Alzheimer's, how we produce animals with asthma, how we produce animals, reliably. Reliable method of making a mouse generate cancer all the time. Reliable method of making a sheep generate asthma. Reliable method of making a dog with heart attacks. You know how? Vaccines. We vaccinate them. That's been known for 100 years. I've published on this. It's been known for 100 years. Charles Richet, a French eugenicist, received a Nobel Prize for showing that vaccines are always deadly. Injecting any protein, any kind of protein, even wholesome protein like milk, like egg, injecting that will either kill somebody, some percentage of people, and produce chronic disease for life in others. And this has been known since 1913, and he received his Nobel Prize. So, and this has been a United States government policy. There's actually federal laws that you cannot question polio vaccine. It's a federal law. Talk about freedom of speech.
Insane.
Yeah. This is what we're dealing with. Yeah, this is what we're dealing with. And Trump is basically, he took it to a whole different level, used military to now drive the same policy. And so my problem with RFK Jr. was his whole career, he was speaking against vaccines. He was producing great data against vaccines. He wrote books about MMR causing autism, which is true. It does cause autism. It's another way reliably to produce autism is to vaccinate. And so he's spent like decades of his work, his organization's work, all that fundraising, all that advocacy. Then he joins Trump's campaign. Immediately, he is subservient to this. Kelly means who the hell is that 30-year-old twerp, excuse my language, other than his father, right? His father, deep state father, Grady Means. So now we have RFK Jr., who is 70 years old, with all his career, all his knowledge, all his expertise. He's now reporting to this guy who wrote all these idiotic bullet points about Maha policy. Okay, so that was my first moment, and in September I published an article about it. And then, 2 months into his position as HHS secretary, he goes on tour promoting MMR vaccine. And as I said in my recent interview, what is this? What is this? It's a humiliation ritual. Okay, so humiliation ritual for him, but mostly it's humiliation ritual for us, because the power behind RFK Jr., whoever that power is, probably strings tied back to Israel. That power says, "Hey, slaves, you can put whoever you want in that position, and he's gonna sing our tune in 2 minutes." Okay, so that's what this is about, and that's what we need to speak against. I don't care, I respected RFK Jr. I think he's a good guy. I think he spent decades doing good work, and I'm calling on him to find that in himself, to continue that work, to actually do what he promised people. He looked in the eye to people who lost their children to these vaccines, people whose children died agonizing, terrible deaths. And he told them that he will bring justice for their children. And what does he do? The first thing, goes promotes MMR, starts singing the tunes of the vaccination complex.
Two comments very different than Brian, and then Monique has joined us, not visually, but she's here. My family went ahead and got the vax without telling me. They knew I was adamantly opposed. They went ahead and did it. They've even got boosters. It's just disturbed me profoundly. And I'm not going to speculate on the effects, but I believe everything you've been saying here, and that everyone who got the vax is going to lose years of their life. The other about RFK Jr. I know women who've interacted with him. He's a womanizer, he's a horn dog. And I have no doubt they have all kinds of blackmail on RFK Jr. For him to come out and endorse the official vaccine schedule of these 60 or more vaccines was insane. His Children's Health Defense has exposed it as a fraud. So how can he now be in a position where he can do something about it, reverse himself and endorse it? Sasha, I've been appalled. What a betrayal. It is only explicable by blackmail.
I don't know about the blackmail though. I mean, yeah, like I don't think they have anything on him like that. So I'm just wondering what this is. Is it because Trump? My thinking is that Trump has actually told him that he has to do this or he won't have this HHS position or something like that. I think it's coming from Trump, really.
I think
Right.
the machine has just issued death threats.
But
Simple as
but
that.
the
They've come out and said, if you're not
but the
going to play,
death
we're
threats,
going to take you out.
like he is he's half of his family has been assassinated, so he knows about death threats. So he knew signing up to this, he knew he was going to have death threats. Um, so that also kind of inexplicable to me. He's not novice to this. He's has extensive experience. Um,
Well, what we've got here is we've got an existential war with a very evil establishment. And we have seen so far in the first 104 days of the presidency that Donald Trump has been unwilling to use the nuclear option. The nuclear option is prosecution. The nuclear option is a reset of the American legal structure with hanging of treasonous criminals. And we expected or we thought that it would be a Pam Bondi, Cash Patel operation, Dan Bongino maybe. We had Matt Gaetz lined up. We had hoped that there would be some semblance of justice, but the problem is, without any sense of justice whatsoever, which is what we've got, there's no need for people to comply or these evil people to comply with the system. So it seems to me that for some reason, Donald Trump has lost his patriotic platform because he's unwilling to prosecute the criminals that are behind all this.
well, I think because his so-called patriotic platform was fake to begin with. He never had one. Yeah, he's not going to persecute anyone. Even not even going as far as persecutions. In RFK's authority, this is solely in RFK's authority. RFK Jr. by law, U.S. law, PrEP Act says that HHS secretary's opinion is the only thing that matters in extending these COVID emergency declarations and the 9 other emergency declarations that we have right now, which is Marburg, Ebola. We have a Marburg epidemic, don't you know? An Ebola pandemic going on right now. So all of these emergency declarations, the law says very clearly that they're made and terminated based solely on opinion of HHS secretary. So RFK Jr. has the power to write a memo into Federal Register, revoke COVID-19 emergency declaration, and then all these mRNA shots stop, especially the ones that are sitting on CDC's childhood schedule, 3 shots for babies under 9 months. So that's my biggest disappointment in RFK Jr. and everyone else who understands the PrEP Act law. We're all aghast at him going around and saying that, making statements like COVID is over, and we're like, excuse me, you haven't done that memo yet. And then say, so COVID is over, and then saying that, well, I can't really remove this. It's because of ACIP, Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices at FDA. That's why I can't remove those shots. And I'm like, ASIP does not, it's just an advisory body. The law gives you authority to remove those shots, and you're not doing anything.
You're making such an excellent point. He ought to do it and take the consequences, even if they blow his head off like they did JFK. Do it.
Or,
Monique,
do it, and so the choices are like my point is like he doesn't need money. He's a rich guy. He doesn't need like publicity. He's very famous. So why can't you do it? And if Trump fires you, well, okay, but then you've accomplished
you'll be
something.
a national hero.
You'll be a national hero. And Trump can't really easily back out of that
Right,
situation.
because he made those promises, and now he's a national goat.
Yeah,
Monique,
And
Brian,
he
Brian,
could revive the Democrat Party as well.
exactly.
very good, Brian.
Yeah,
Monique,
why not?
you cannot see her, but we will hear her. Monique, give us your thoughts.
Hi, thank you so much for getting me on the show. I had no idea, and I'm so happy. Nice to meet you, Sasha. And Brian, I've met you before. Hi. Uh, a couple points here coming in this last minute here. First of all, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his promises and then his backpedaling, the only thing I could think of with regards to the blackmail that you stated could possibly be happening. And I don't think so, but we all know that he was on Epstein's plane with his family. So we've been told. So, does it have something to do with that? Because there are other people that Trump has aligned himself with who were in that plane. So that's just one thought. I feel that he has really changed though. He does the AA meetings. He believes in God. I mean, anybody could say anything at any time, but to me, he does really seem sincere. I was really upset when I found out about the babysitter incident 30 years ago. And of course, people were saying that she was just instilled in there to throw him off. But I mean, he really did text an apology to her, and it's really, it's wrong. It's not like it was usually a huge violation, but she was working and he touched her and she was afraid. And I know a lot of people have been in that situation, particularly females when they're at work, not so much now.
Monique,
With
I know an adult woman attorney who had enough interaction that Bobby was coming on to virtually every woman in sight. I mean, he's a horn dog, and I think they got all kinds of blackmail on him. The point is, he's got to have the guts, the courage to do the right thing. As Sasha's observed, he got the legal authority to end all these suspend, revoke all these crisis past implementations. Why is the word escaping? He just should do it and take the risk. He's going to be a hero to the nation. As Brian says, he might even revive the Democrat Party. I'm sorry, it's not excusable, his behavior. The point is, well, of the past. The point is, right now, he could do something important and good, and he's not doing it.
Yeah, and all the female Democrats would love him for it. Like,
He'd
here
have more,
you go.
he'd
You
have
can
more
be.
notches on his belt. Yeah, Monique, go ahead.
yeah. Well, I do want to say, okay, go into the positives of him. If you'll notice, I have this photo. It's from a couple years ago. I was running for a volunteer position in Screen Actors Guild. I plan to do that again, actually, because one of the reasons is I've been so upset throughout the years that I was pursuing this acting career, and I could never do commercials mainly because number one, I'm a vegan. Number two, like 40 to 60% are pharmaceuticals, and I don't believe in that. My dad passed away of 25 medications being injected into him at one time, and other family members have passed away due to this. And I would actually like to inject myself into SAG and say, hey, can we have some ethics here before we're permitted to accept these types of roles? Because I don't, I mean, I guess anybody could do what they want, but it's not just a acting job like a movie. If you're a spokesperson, if you're putting your face on that commercial and you don't know what it's going to do to people and, possibly destroy their lives. So I just wanted to explain what that photo was. I did get to meet his wife, Cheryl. I was a background actor in one of her episodes, and I saw her in a screening. And then for his dyes, the food dyes, I gotta say, I know people are yelling like, "Why is he starting with the food dyes?" Right? I believe and I agree with you all. He needs to do something. Like I don't like what's happening, but going to the positives here. So, uh, quick anecdote. I was up for a commercial some years ago. There was red food dye in it. I looked it up. I saw it could cause cancer in rats. And I told my agent, yeah, I don't feel comfortable with this. She was not so happy, let's just put it that way. And I keep sending her articles about what RFK Jr. is doing with the food dyes. So, I mean, we could start, at least we're starting small. That's all I could say. But yeah, why isn't he taking the vaccine off the market? Why is he promoting the MMR shot? Why isn't he speaking out as he should be? I did see his inquisition, we'll call that, before he got appointed. And it was I don't know. I wish he could do so much more. And Dr. Fetzer, as much as I agree with you on that, like, okay, if he gets harmed or whatnot, there must be always some fear that could be going through a person. Um, there's people that I know. One person works for BARDA. He has not said one thing to me in 2.5 years. I've given him all the information about people dying, people being injured. And by the way, Sasha, thank you for interviewing Byers Law Group. Yay! They're trying to get uh, criminality on the people who
Yeah.
The point
put
is,
Let me just quickly address this food things, the food dye things.
harmed
So
people in the hospital. I hope that you'll talk about
so the food dye, it's a total nonsense item. Okay, they don't cause cancer. So those papers, I actually specifically I wrote an article about it. These papers that state that, oh, these things cause cancer in rats or mice. In human equivalent, you literally have to eat 400 pounds of red 3 to get that effect, maybe 400 pounds. Okay, so they hire, so there's this specific area of deflection where you can hire all kinds of, and I worked for a shop like this, all kinds of consulting shops to write you papers like this, and many academics also, you give them a grant, they'll write whatever you want. So they write these studies that show these nonsensical risks in nonsensical models, and then they promote it. Even smoking doesn't cause cancer as much as people think. It doesn't. Vaccines do. Vaccines cause cancer. So as I said, previously before you joined, in clinical research, we develop, when we use specific animal strains or animal breeds for different disease conditions like cancerous strains of mice and rats for cancer research, Alzheimer's research, asthma research. We produce these animals by vaccinating them, not by feeding them red 3, by vaccinating them. That's why that when you actually have to produce cancer, you vaccinate. You don't feed them red 3, you don't make them smoke cigarettes, you vaccinate them. And that's why MAHA policy is a huge distraction by deep state, by Grady Means, Kelly Means, who are working for WEF and working for all these masters. And they specifically designed this policy to deflect, to spend all the time. The administration has about 18 months to do anything about this. 18 months is a very short period of time. They already wasted 4 months. That Trump's EO is all these Maha talking points, EO for Maha strategy for RFK Jr. is all these Kelly Means' talking points where vaccines are barely mentioned, if at all. So that's what it's all about. That's why I'm so frustrated with this.
Brian.
Oh, I'm just ready to listen to these ladies talk about this stuff. Sasha, I'd like you to address the militarization of this a little bit more for our audience, because I think there's a lot of disconnect between what we think is WHO mandates or even Fauci, Centers for Medicaid, Medicare. How does the military come into play, and why would they be involved in pushing this deadly agenda?
So why, I still don't know. We need to ask those questions of them. But as far as that, this is a military campaign. So this is what me and Debbie Lerman published about. It's called COVID Dossier. So we've compiled evidence of military operation worldwide, led from the United States. And we have profiled initially 5 or 6 countries, but then readers also provided a lot of additional material. Now we have profiles for nearly entire world. Showing the same thing. The same thing is once there was an announcement of a pandemic. So also people don't understand this. They're saying they think, the public thinks that when a government announces a pandemic, it means something actually is going on, like deaths or illness, severe illness, massive illness in excess of previously observed illness, and economic damage. That's in people's mind. If you ask somebody from the street, what do you think pandemic is? They'll tell you it's, oh, everybody's dying, economy is collapsing, it's total mayhem, and then the government announces a pandemic. Completely the opposite picture is going on here with this militarized approach. With militarized approach, it's like announcement of war, announcement of an attack. They announce and then they bomb. Okay, so that's what they did. They announced we have a virus based on a computer model that Ralph Barrick cooked up together with his collaborators, Daszak, whoever.
Stasha, we got a break coming up here. I'm glad
Okay.
you're here. We'll be opening the lines for callers momentarily. Stand by.
All right.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Management would like to take a moment to thank the listeners and hosts for all their support that has made Revolution Radio one of the biggest platforms for free speech in an ever-growing dark world of censorship. Unfortunately, this platform for free speech has never been free. We need the support of the people. It is the people like you, yes, you, that keeps the station in the front lines of the battle against tyranny and oppression. Please help support Revolution Radio so free speech will not be silenced in a world that seems to be going deaf to the real truth. With your support, we will be able to become an even bigger pillar of light in a dark world.
FreedomSlips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
Even the government admits that 9/11 was a conspiracy. But did you know that it was an inside job? That Osama had nothing to do with it. that the Twin Towers were blown apart by a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes. That Building 7 collapsed 7 hours later because of explosives planted in the building. Barry Jennings was there. He heard them go off and felt himself stepping over dead people. The U.S. Geological Survey conducted studies of dust gathered from 35 locations in lower Manhattan and found elements that would not have been there had this not been a nuclear event. Ironically, that means the government's own evidence contradicts the government's official position. 9/11 was brought to us compliments of the CIA, the neocons of the Department of Defense, and the Mossad. Don't let yourself be played. Read America Nuked on 9/11. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Rebel Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
We do have two callers standing by, but before we get to them, Sasha, you wanted to complete your thought. Go right ahead.
Right. So about COVID military operation and COVID dossier. So the main evidence, we've listed it in our publications, both Debbie and I. For every country, we provide who was in charge of the response, and for the U.S., it was National Security Council was in charge of policy for COVID, meaning that this COVID response had nothing to do with public health and had to do with chemical, radiological, biological, nuclear attack or pretend attack. So they invoked the response that was designed for chemical, radiological, biological, nuclear attacks, even though there was no attack. As I said, they just announced that we have a virus model on a computer, and based on this model, we're going to implement all these countermeasures. So countermeasures is a very important term. Countermeasures, it's a military term, and it's very vague because pretty much anything can be used as a weapon. It can be used as a defense against a weapon. Like a lock on the door is a countermeasure against breaking in. So once they invoke these military laws, as if we're under a cyber attack, they proceed lying to the public, saying it's a public health event, saying it's a naturally evolved virus for many, many years. And only now they're kind of, pedaling back and saying it's a lab leak. But in reality, there was neither. There wasn't a natural virus. There wasn't a lab leak. The DoD ran ahead. We for the longest period of time, we didn't know why the PrEP Act declarations for COVID emergency were made retroactive or backdated to February 4th, 2020. And then eventually I found out because I was sent a whistleblower tape from inside AstraZeneca of two AstraZeneca executives, the CEO and VP of monoclonal antibodies, discussing this and saying, we were approached by DARPA in 2017 to start this consortium working on these countermeasures for, flu pandemic. And then on February 4th, 2020, they called us and said to switch from our flu pandemic models to COVID pandemic models and start working on COVID products on February 4th, 2020. The caller was from DARPA, Colonel Matt Hepburn. I've written extensively about him. He's yet to be brought to Congress to ask questions. Who told him that there was a national security threat on February 4th, 2020? Who authorized him to place the phone call to the pharmaceutical consortium, direct them all, it's hundreds of companies, direct them all to start working on COVID products? And this was a month before Trump made any announcements, any emergency declarations or anything. So obviously DoD ran ahead, ran this script. Then we have video from press conferences at Pentagon where for Dietrich representatives, that's U.S. world's longest operating biolab is Fort Detrick. That's where they make all the bioweapons. And we have Fort Detrick representatives talking about it and saying that on March 5th, 2020, that they have received the pathogen and that they're growing stocks of it. And this is way before U.S. had any appreciable illness from COVID or deaths from COVID. So we're having U.S. Army Fort Detrick Biolab declaring that they're growing this pathogen inside the U.S. when U.S. has none of this pathogen. So what are we saying here? We're saying we've announced a pandemic as a military. We're making the stocks of this virus, whatever that is. It's a chemical weapon. And then, and after that announcement, that lady, she's Colonel Wendy Sammons Jackson, makes that announcement. After her announcement, we have cases and deaths growing in the US. Before that, there was zero. So that's what we're saying. It's a military attack. It's orchestrated by the military. Obviously, we have all this pre-planning, the practice, the Event 201, Rick Bright talking to Fauci in 2018 saying they're going to do it. So we have all this evidence of pre-planning, lots of money going into it, all these consortia, their actions, and then whatever the fallout was after they announced we have this pandemic action, right? So. And that's what our dossier details for all countries in the world. So I just described the US, but in all the countries that we've profiled, Canada, UK, Netherlands, Italy, Germany, they all follow the same script.
And there was no increase in deaths in any age group before they started vaccinating.
Exactly. There was no, there was no excess deaths. Although, my personal opinion is that some sort of a chemical weapon was used by the US Army to produce very unusual symptoms. But the chemical weapon or biological weapon that they were using was non-lethal. So it won't show up in death data. It won't show up in excess death data. It will only show up in illness data and symptoms. So I think they used it to add elements of realism to their propaganda and fear mongering. But the deaths were almost 100% of the deaths from COVID were either hospital murders or deaths that were from other causes, and they would just post-mortem test them with PCR and produce this COVID label. So that's basically what the deaths were.
The hospital were making a lot of money by killing patients. I mean,
yes. They're making 100,000 to almost 500,000 to 1 million per head by killing people with the CDC protocol. Okay. And I even have firsthand experience. They tried to kill my mother-in-law. We saved her. But I know exactly the protocol. I know exactly the tactics that they were using. And they've murdered people in gruesome ways and total torture. And these people they should be prosecuted. They should be prosecuted. They should be put in jail. They should be on trial for their life at this
We're talking about doctors and hospitals.
Doctors and nurses. Those doctors and nurses need to be on trial for their lives.
Yeah. Brian, you wanted to interject?
Well, one of the things that's always bothered me is if they went this far with Agenda 21, why not take it one step further and just declare martial law and take control? Why didn't they make it to that stage?
I think they wanted to preserve the pretense of democracy and pacify the public. See, if you do martial law, you can have a lot of people resisting because they didn't ask for it. They don't want it. So I think it's a psyop, Brian, to do it the way they did. Sasha, would you agree?
Yeah, it is. It's psyop. Basically.
Okay, we got two callers here. 816, Brian, go ahead, join the conversation. We got Paul standing by. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question for Sasha. I'm living with a girl who has two children, and one is 4, one is like a little over 1 year old. And when she was living with me, she said, I need you to ask Archangel Raphael about vaccines and all this stuff, prenatal vitamins. And boy, he went nuts on prenatal vitamins. He said, they're full of poison. He said, don't take them. And he said, if you're Rh negative, your child will miscarry. And so she had a friend that was Rh negative, and we told her, and she took the prenatal vitamins, and she miscarried. And she wouldn't take them, but her sister took these prenatal vitamins, and she had vaginal bleeding, throwing up, her hair got really bad. And this girl, avoiding all this, she was perfect. And then when the baby was born, he had to really fight to keep any vaccines out of the boy. I mean, their last line of defense is the vitamin K shot, okay? When she rejected everything, they said, well, he needs a vitamin K shot. And she said, no, I eat enough mushrooms. I'm not worried about it. And this boy's IQ is so much higher than the other kids. And it's the same with the daughter.
Brian,
That's
you don't
what
sound well, my friend. Are you okay?
Well, I get emotional. Okay, I get emotional. That's why. It's just me, the way I am sometimes. But anyway, my question is this. They weigh so much more than the other kids. When we're on the playground, and my little guy is heavy. He weighs a ton, and these other kids, it's like picking up a feather. You know, they're just so much lighter, the ones that have had all these vaccines. I was just curious about why that's the case.
Well, yeah, so all vaccines damage children, and vitamin K shot too. So the data that I was discussing, actually they even parsed out effects of everyone. So effect of if mother was vaccinated, effect if the child got K shot, and then the effect of the child getting one vaccine and subsequent more vaccines. And it's clear as day that every single shot, including the shots that are given to pregnant women, affects negatively the baby and the future outcomes, you know, like their probability of developing chronic illness, their probability of, basically they were looking at chronic illness, but yes, it affects everything. And as I said, these vaccines, they destroy microbiome. So children don't gain weight correctly, or they are overweight. This is the effect of a destroyed microbiome. With normal microbiome, kids can eat almost anything and will be totally fine. But won't gain weight either. So if you look at the photos or video footage, let's say before 1950s, somewhere from like 1900s to 1950s, you see a crowd of people, everyone is skinny. Everyone is skinny. And they were not like all like health obsessed and like on some special diets. And actually, everybody was eating bread and sugar and fat. That was a conventional diet of staple food. And you can see the entire crowd is healthy, skinny people, normal, athletic looking people. Nobody is overweight. And when I was growing up, and I'm sure you guys have the same experience, when I was growing up, we did not have anybody. I did not know autism existed until I got to the US. I didn't know it was a thing. Like when I came to the US and in the 90s and I saw a movie, Rain Man, I was like, what does this guy have? Like, what is it? Because it's solely attributable to vaccines. 100% to vaccines. Childhood cancer is 100% vaccines. 100% vaccines. Children don't live long enough to accumulate the damage by anything else, because everything else takes decades.
I thought it was bizarre, that fascinating you say how it contributes to obesity. We have these fat kids, and it's not because of their diet. It's not because of sugar. It's not they like candy. Oh, Sasha, this is wonderful. Paul, go ahead.
No, as I said, like I was growing up in Ukraine. All the food is fatty, sugary, the piroshki and like vareniki and all that stuff. And like we ate it every day. Every day going from school, we would buy ice cream. We would buy like buns from these ladies that were selling them in the street. Like they bake their own bread, and we would buy it. Everybody was skinny. Nobody was overweight.
Brian, you wanted to add?
Jim, can I I want to add a quick comment. He's so spot on, because I'm with these kids every day and they eat bacon and eggs for breakfast. They eat junk, you name it. And they're skinny as rails. They weigh a lot, but
Brian.
they're skinny. Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Paul, join the conversation. Paul.
Yeah, great show. Sasha, I'm a regular reader and watcher of your video interviews. You may know this, I don't know, but Rain Man that came out, I think it was the same year, right around there, where they gave the vaccine manufacturers exemptions. So that's like an interesting coincidence, I would say. all the stuff that you talked about today, even your appearance in many ways, so in my opinion, vindicates so many of my calls and my confrontations with Jim here. I know on this very show, I've called RFK to shit before, just like I used to call Trump the same thing, because it speaks to a man's character. In other words, I don't really believe you have to blackmail a lot of these men with very low character. And it was revealed, I believe, in one of his divorce proceedings, that RFK kept a journal and recorded the fact that he slept with 38 other women and wrote about them. And, you just have to ask yourself, who does that? Who does that type of thing, right? And, who knows what's wrong with a man like that? But, as I mentioned to Jim back in 2015 or 16, that Trump had been accused of rape in court documents. I believe the girl was 14 at the time. This is just, these people that are promoted into leadership are going to be very flawed individuals for the most part. Otherwise, they're not going to be there. When I heard that RFK Jr. was going after food dyes, I laughed. Because, of course, it's just like the best analogy would be they have warehouses of food and they throw us a cookie. I mean, these people, the whole system is rotten. It's evil through and through, and they're not going to stop until it ends it's going to end badly.
I was skeptical of all those allegations about Trump in the past, Paul, as you're correctly reporting, but I believe them today. And I have an expert in the area of pedophilia and politics, Joaquin Agopian, who's got a 5-volume series, and Trump's name appears like 48 times. I mean, it's bad, very bad.
I'll add one more little thing. So I read somewhere, or I heard that Muhammad Ali once said, if you're the same man at 50 that you were at 20, you wasted 30 years of your life. I've got my own little saying about cowardice. And it's like, if you are a coward at 65 or 70 years old, okay, if you're so afraid of other men and what they might do to you that you will throw away your integrity and your character, you never had much integrity or character.
Well, Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, Jack and Bobby are in my all-time pantheon of heroes, greatest in world history. Sasha, welcome. Anything else? I'm so overjoyed to have you here today. It's just wonderful.
Well, thank you, and great comments also. I just want to emphasize to people, keep your children healthy. Keep your children healthy by keeping them away from pediatricians. Pediatricians are the highest risk factor in a child's life.
Nutritionists.
No, pediatricians. The
Pediatricians. Yeah. But especially the vax. I mean, if you had a non-vax.
All these child well visits, they're all vaccination appointments. So that's why you have to keep them safe, keep them away from the system. Find other ways of, there are other doctors depending on the state. Some states are horrible, like California. Some states allow different other practitioners, and if you need for whatever, like real health emergencies, but taking them for these vaccination appointments, it's awful. It can destroy a child, as we all know. And vaccines are number one reason for all chronic conditions, everything you can think of. I have a neighbor here. I live in Nevada, and he's a ski instructor. So we kind of talked about the vaccines and so forth. He wasn't aware, but like he's becoming a little bit more red-pilled on this. And the other day he was giving a lesson to like 6 or 7 children, and he came back, and I saw him here outside, and he said, "Oh, you know what? I was giving lesson to these children, and I was given a sheet beforehand. Every child has a chronic illness. Every child in his class had a chronic illness."
That's
and
awful.
He was like, they all had allergies, they all had this and that. Oh, you were right, like you told me about this before, and now I see it.
Let me squeeze in some final comments. Monique, would you like to make a remark here?
Yes, I'm like typing my notes here. I actually wanted to go back to the Fort Detrick, if that's all right.
Mhm.
Okay. So, the way I found out that this was a pandemic was mainly through Dr. Rashid
Brian,
Ali Buttar.
get to mute, Brian. Go ahead, Monique.
Oh, no worries. So yeah, he was talking about Fort Detrick back in April of 2020, Dr. Buttar. I'd like to know, Sasha, how would someone like that know that it was started there? He did talk about the experiments with SARS over at the University of Chapel Hill in North Carolina. And then, well, I figured out how Dr. Francis Boyle would know. He was speaking out too, not like Dr. Buttar. And then Dr. Shiva was as well. This was back in April. No one else that I heard was speaking and about this, and they all disappeared off of YouTube. So
Yeah.
can you address that? Because Dr. Buttar, he was a very special person, and he was poisoned, and the man's name should be etched in stone, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't following him. I've seen a couple of clips, and I know he was poisoned, but I have no idea like how he knew and what he knew, and I never talked to him, so I can't I don't know. I didn't know it was for Dietrich at the time. I mean, I came into this from with a naive perspective of a pharmaceutical industry uh, practitioners looking at what they're doing and nonsensical actions that of the public health agencies, and I was just confused and trying to figure it out for myself. I eventually found out about Fort Detrick, so but I didn't know. Francis Boyle, yeah, he would know, and he's also he suddenly died. Um,
Yeah.
I'm actually scheduled to testify in the same case he was scheduled to testify as witness. And we received news that he just suddenly passed away, and nobody, we still don't know the cause of death.
Right?
I
He
think
never said anything.
likely it was not a natural death. Monique, I got to get Brian Caller. Give me a brief final thought. Brian Caller.
Well, I can just say that the two children I have here are just proof of everything Monique talked about, that she's spot on. So
Good.
that's all I have to say.
Very good. Paul, final thought.
I'll just quickly throw in earlier in the show, Brian, your co-host, talked about this thing was a failure, and one of the reasons it was a failure is they failed in the long-term goal of herd immunity, which I kind of found shocking to hear. So
Well,
just so you know, Brian, there's no
I
such thing.
wasn't using the term in a medical sense. I was using the term in that the population that made it through the pandemic is awakened to their tricks. So I was using it as a psychological term, just simply saying, hey, look, they failed because now we're aware of the dirty tricks they're willing to play.
yeah, but yeah, it struck me as odd when Brian said it, so I had to think about it too, Paul. Do you have a further thought, Paul, you'd like to add as an addendum?
No, that's it. I was gonna joke about bringing the clip from one of your shows in March of 2020 when I remember I said it was a snipe hunt and there was no such thing as a virus.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Paul, you're looking great in retrospect, I gotta say, buddy. Brian, your thoughts, Brian Davidson. Any further thoughts?
You know, if I was going to give the audience a prescription for understanding modern medicine, I would probably refer people to David Whitehead's series, The Cult of the Medics, which I found to be one of the most eye-opening programs I'd ever watched in terms of how deep the occultism and how deep the programs that they've been putting out that they call modern medicine are tied to ancient cultic rituals. So go find it. It's called The Cult of the Medics. It's by David Whitehead, and it's a very well built series that's well worth a couple of afternoons to sit down and watch.
Sasha, we have just a few minutes, but I'd like you to just say whatever the public needs to understand. You have done such wonderful work, and I'm so grateful for you joining today.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being a great audience. You can find all this information I'm discussing in great detail on my Substack, so please subscribe to my Substack. It's sashalatypova.substack.com, and my publication is called Due Diligence and Art. And so I've published all the extensive evidence with all the references and sources, and you can find it there.
Wow. Sasha, what do you think is the greatest threat to humanity? Remember, Bill Gates was the Pied Piper. It seemed to me he was laying out a foundation. He was doing all these seminars before any of this broke. The greatest threat to humanity is not nuclear war, it's a pandemic. He was planting the seed. He was doing predictive programming. Could you comment on this monster? He's right up there with Fauci, in my opinion, and Klaus Schwab among the monsters of our time.
Yeah, I think he is one of the biggest villains out there. It's him and these other people like who are affiliated with WEF and affiliated with especially all these health and pandemic and climate change initiatives. But I think he's also being slowly replaced with Elon Musk. So the regime always has some sort of a techno-utopian leader, which used to be Bill Gates, but he's probably aged out of that role, and he has too much already bad publicity attached to him. So now it's kind of like stages being moved to Elon Musk as a younger, a more techno hip, magnet there. But just beware of like whatever is being pushed in your face by media, mainstream or alternative. Alternative media is guilty of the same thing. They'll take some sort of a headline that doesn't matter and push it in your face like this red dye story or something else. You should know that if something is completely like always in your face from both sides, it's a lie.
Sasha, you're wonderful beyond words. Everyone spends much time with your family, your friends, the people you love and care about. We don't know how much time we have left. Use it wisely and forget about the vax. Meanwhile,
Stay away from
revolution. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.